Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined by Tate and Tom for a very special review. The first review in the new series, the David Fincher Retrospective, starting with Alien 3, released in 1992, and we'll be going all the way up to The Killer, which releases on November the 10th on Netflix. Felt weird doing an intro in that way. I hadn't obviously written it down, but how are we all doing tonight?
Yeah, doing good. It's nice to be back on another director retrospective series, especially leading up to a new film. I know we were originally planning on doing Denis, can't pronounce his last name, Villeneuve, or however you pronounce it. Villeneuve.
I always do the Spanish pronunciation, but I always think he's like French Canadian.
Yeah, but of course, you know, that's fallen through slightly. So I guess we're going to be leading up to The Killer, and we get to go back through a director who I actually quite like. He's not a director that I'd immediately go to if I'm naming my favorite directors, but then you look at his catalogue of films and you go, actually, I like most of these. These are really good thriller films, and I guess he kind of, you know, has his stranglehold on that genre. So yeah, looking forward to talking through some. But first, Alien 3.
It's going to be good fun. I too am also really good, especially after playing days and days of Baldur's Gate 3 for a topical reference, and loving every second. But I did have time to watch both cuts of Alien 3, so I stepped away from my computer.
This is a good way to kind of intro. So I've watched the normal theatrical cut in the lead up to this. Tate, you've watched the assembly cut. Tom, you've watched both cuts. So between the three of us, we have covered all the grounds. No way was I watching it twice, and I don't have my Alien box set anymore. Really weird thing happened. So when we did the James Cameron retrospective, also completely uncoincidental that we've done Aliens with James Cameron at the start of the year and Alien 3 with Fincher at the end of the year. And the next thing it'll be Ridley Scott. And the Blu-ray box set just doesn't work on PS5 Blu-ray players. And I went on Reddit, and it was like, all my films work fine except Aliens. And I couldn't find it anywhere. Obviously, it's on Disney Plus, so I watched it on there. So I sold off the box set, and I had to go watch this on Disney Plus, and they only had the theatrical cut. So that's my background for this. But before we waffle about that, I know that Alien 3 is a very controversial film. It's got its fans, it's got its haters, it's got people that like both cuts or one of the cuts. So we do want to hear from everybody at home. So please do comment with your thoughts on Alien 3. Of course, the film has been out for 30 plus years, so you spoil whatever you want. Put whatever you want about the film in the comments. Maybe your thoughts on the other Alien films, how it compares to those two. And as always, hit the subscribe button if you like this video. Are there more Alien reviews coming? There is an Alien film in production for next year, so technically yes.
Should we go through Alien 4, the Alien versus Predator films? Just clear them all out.
I haven't seen Alien Covenant, but we were robbed of the real Alien.
God, I have seen Alien Covenant.
We were robbed of Neil Blomkamp's Alien 3. I'll never get over that. Yeah, so do comment, let us know. This series is going to be going through to November, as you mentioned. It'll be every Monday. We're going to have these uploads a bit different to normal because we've got Ahsoka's airing on Wednesdays. And if you want to get us on social media, in the description, we've got a Linktree link, which just has all of our socials where you can find us. That's linktree.com/cinemasavvy. Link to Redbubble there as well. So you can get us on all our social medias until Twitter eventually implodes, if it hasn't imploded by Monday. It's sort of like, what's that?
Yeah. I thought it already.
It's like there's you can like Avatar 2 where they kept saying it was coming out next year and it was like 13 years later. That's going to be how Twitter goes. I'm telling you all now. But before we get into this properly, just so everyone can get to not know this a bit more, but our backgrounds of Fincher. Tate, you mentioned some of the films you've seen of his. My background with Fincher in a really nice, and I will do the usual. If anyone can remember the first Fincher film they saw, maybe. I didn't see much of his till I started studying film. And I feel this is going to be a theme for a couple of people I've spoke to that are coming on this series. A lot of people end up studying his work at uni or at like college. So I did A-level film, and we had a module on Fincher, mainly on Fight Club, but then we'd watch loads of his other films with it. So I really got into his films when I was about 16. And technically, I said this tape before it went live. The first film I saw was The Social Network when it came out in 2010. And I didn't like it at the time. I haven't seen it since, but I'm going to say that that's the opinion of a 13-year-old who probably wasn't aware of how good that film is. And upon doing the series, Social Network is the one I've been looking forward to seeing the most, aside from Seven, which is obviously, my favorite. So it's a weird one for the first one I saw. I can't remember. I'm being honest, I can't remember much about it at all. So I'm very excited to go into that. But properly, yeah, I think Seven's the one I've seen the most of his films, if that sort of balances out.
So for me, I guess my initial kind of initiation with David Fincher films was, I think I was in college. I think that, yeah, like you said, it's going to be a running theme of this, like people who are watching it not at a young age, because he goes for quite dark, kind of edgy thrillers as his main area of expertise. But I think I watched Seven first, and I think that was in college when I was about 16, 17 or something like that. And then I kind of slowly made my way through his films. So Zodiac, The Game, and then Social Network finally got around to it. I think I ranked Social Network. I ranked it somewhere on my favorite films of the 2010s when we did that list. But since then, I've seen it at least twice. And I'll be perfectly honest, Social Network is climbing very, very high on my favorite films of all time. It really is. It's got to break easily top 10 for my favorite films of all time. And as a director, I would highly recommend anyone as just like an entry level kind of Fincher film, just send them straight to Social Network. But I can't wait for that review. That one I'm looking forward to the most, just because, yeah, there's so much to talk about with that film. But yeah, my first film, I guess my first encounter would have been Seven.
Mine, I started watched Fight Club, the very first Fincher film I ever saw. In like, I think I had the DVD purchased for me, because I was a little bit young, and have since enjoyed all of his stuff, and then subsequently went on to Seven, Zodiac, as you mentioned, Social Network. Before you asked, I think we've all sort of answered the question even before you've asked it. I'm going to pick two Fincher films for my favorites. One of them being Zodiac. I absolutely love Zodiac. I think it's one of his, well, if not his best film. And Gone Girl. I really enjoy Gone Girl. That's one of my favorite Fincher films as well. I mean, they're all good, I suppose, if you count Alien 3 among them. We'll get onto that. But they're all good, and yeah, but those two stand out as favourites of mine.
That's fair. And what I will add to that, we're doing the film review, so I've never seen Mindhunter. I know that he's directed most of Mindhunter. I don't think he's the showrunner, or he's one of the producers.
I want to say he was one of the lead showrunners for it, and he's he did direct an awful lot of it. Yeah.
So we're not doing Mindhunter. So we're not going to have a Mindhunter review.
And I think producer or exec producer on House of Cards as well, I think.
Yes, he definitely directed the pilot of House of Cards. So we're just doing the films, because if it was TV, that'd be a completely different series. But Mindhunter's been on my Netflix list for a couple of years now.
We've also got to do all of his music videos as well.
Featuring Madonna. There could have been a terrible Alien joke there, but I'm not going to stoop that low. But cracking on from that, Tayte, as always, the IMDb plot synopsis. It's weird talking Alien 3 because we've just done so many franchises, but this is technically from a Fincher perspective. But also, at the end of the day, it's also an Alien film, so it's like a double up, I guess.
Yes, so here we go. Returning from LV-426, Ellen Ripley crash lands on the maximum security prison, Fiorina 161, where she discovers that she has unwittingly brought along an unwelcome visitor. Actually does a pretty good job of, describing the plot. She lands on a prison planet, she discovers she's brought an alien with her. That's kind of all you need to set up an Alien film, isn't it?
She actually crash landed on Earth in the year 2032 after 20 years of Tory government. And that's where we are. That's where we're heading. Because I'm just going to say it now. The regional accents in this film are so strong. And that completely caught me off guard on the rewatch. I know the first two were very British, but the third one was almost... They filmed on a beach, right? One of like the British beaches. And of course they did. And I don't know why it feels so British in such a weird way.
That's literally a British beach next year.
What's Armando Iannucci? Oh my god, the incredible comedy, the Death of Stalin. How it was all like regional British accents. That's what it felt like of Alien 3, and then there's just the one American. And it's okay. Sorry, just to get out of the way because it's the accents that really threw me, and obviously Rick Ollie from Star Wars appearing in this, who I absolutely love. Just to get the Star Wars references out there early, but. As always, we'll kick off with the memories about this film. And I'll be really honest with you guys. I've only ever seen Alien 3 once before this weekend. When I saw the Alien films for the first time, probably about 9-10 years ago. You know, when you're the age, right, you're ticking off like films that everyone loves. And you do Alien, you do Aliens. There's an amazing post on Vara recently of someone on Letterboxd. It's got to be a joke. They ranked Alien as 4.5 stars, but this would be amazing if there was more than one Alien. And then the follow-up is an entry of Aliens, like, whoa, and it's 5-star. I'll just say it. I don't mind saying this, and I know it's got its fans, this film. It's a pretty impossible task to try and follow up Aliens. I'll give it that. And the fact that Aliens is following Alien anyway, that's arguably two of the best sci-fi films ever made, coming one after the other. And my memories watching this, I didn't like it that much. But I was like, oh my God, is that Pete Postlethwaite? And that's basically my memory of the film. and that's still my memory. I know they're all bold in this, but I was really watching it. I was like, I swear he's in this. And he does eventually pop up. But he's just
one of the only ones you can recognize.
I didn't even know Paul McGann was in it till last week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I recognized him after like the second or third scene. I was like, oh my God, that's Paul McGann.
It's because of the hair. And like Rick Ollie again from Star Wars, you know, it's even, I mean, you're not going to recognize Ripley, obviously, but it just really caught me off guard all those years ago. And yeah, I don't dislike it in the sense, oh, I don't like the Alien film. That's the fourth Alien film for me. But I'm just very neutral with it. And that's my memories. It's like I've never rushed back to rewatch it. And obviously, as time's gone by, you hear more of that sort of, when films are disowned by the director, I tend to just keep away from them because, you know, obviously not that they don't want people watching it, but I think Christopher Nolan spoke about recently. Chris Nolan loves Alien 3, but he was like, don't tell David Fincher I said that on an interview. And I just can't picture him watching this and loving it. But that being said, yeah, not so much memories for me. I'm going to pass on to you guys because I'm waffling.
So this was the first time I've seen this film ever.
Whoa.
I mean, I'd seen clips of it. Like, I'd seen the scene of the alien facing up against Ripley in the face, and that is, I actually want to say, probably, I want to say, and sure, there have been other iconic, you know, scenes and stuff like that in Alien. This one, for me, is when I think of the Alien franchise, this imagery is the one that immediately sticks with me, which is weird, because I'd never seen the film before. So to have that as like the, whenever I think of Alien franchise, I don't immediately go to Ripley in the mech suit versus the Alien Queen in Aliens. I don't go to kind of, you know, the ventilation shaft in the first one. I don't go to any of those, or chestburster even. I go to this scene, and I'd never even seen this film before. So that's kind of how visually I was aware of this film. I guess that and Ripley's sacrifice at the end are the only two things that I actually was aware of in this film.
Spoilers.
For a 30-year-old film. But yeah, apart from that, I hadn't seen it. So this was my first viewing, my first watch. And honestly, first impressions, I low-key like this film. I kind of do. It's kind of what, thinking back, I guess, you go dark, brooding, lots of shadows, you know, quite violent. This is a Fincher film. And I know I've seen it on a lot of people's lists of like worst films that directors have started off with who've become great directors and stuff like that. I don't get why this is so bad. This is not as good as the first two films. I want to throw that out there immediately. This is not like me saying, oh yeah, Alien 3 is up there with the other two. No. This is a step below, but it doesn't mean that it isn't a good end to what would have been a trilogy. And it's quite a dark film to end it on. And saying it's dark for a franchise where aliens literally murder people every 5 minutes is, you know, something else. But this was a nice progression and a nice kind of final battle. I know there's a fourth Alien film. I know there's Alien vs. Predator and other things past this. But for me, I'd be happy if the franchise would have ended here because this is an okay finish.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. Those those points as well. I mean, one of the things that I'm a fan, air quotes, I guess. So this obviously the assembly cut is the much better version of the film.
Maybe that's why I liked it.
Well, maybe
I see the right cut.
Yeah. If you watch the theatrical cut, you may go, this is shit. Like what am I watching? Yeah. So I enjoy both versions of it. Mainly, and I agree with you. It's one of the things that I like trilogies to do, especially so I suppose blockbuster ones and stuff like this, is that the third film always comes back to the first. So whereas the first film is very claustrophobic, very insular, and it just takes place in this one location. The second one is bigger, more action, loads more stuff happens. And the third one brings it all full circle back to the first, where it's much more insular. There's a singular threat. It's more claustrophobic, and that's what I like about it. And it's the same with the Dark Knight trilogy. The first one, does the origin. The second one is a lot bigger, and the third obviously is quite a big step up, but it comes full circle with the original film. So I mean, I like stuff like that in trilogies in general, and it's very much the same for this. And I think one of the reasons is that Fincher, I believe, came onto this wanting to do justice to, let's say, like, just weird word, but wanted to put his stamp on it, and wanted it to be faithful to the first film, which he's a really, really, really big fan of, and wanted essentially perfection on it, as of course David Fincher does. And I'm sure we'll get behind the scenes stuff of it. But yeah, we'll get heavily into that. I actually don't know what the original question was. Memories. That's it. Memories of the film. Yeah, I don't remember the first time I watched this, so it's been a couple of years since I've seen it, like rewatched it, and I don't remember the first time I picked this up and saw it.
That's fair, and I think that's interesting what you said there as well, though, that bringing the Dark Knight comparison, because I think what goes against Alien 3, and I think I haven't seen The Flash, sorry to divert, but yes, okay, there wasn't a third Michael Keaton Batman film, but did he really want to tarnish that you did those two together? Do you really want to come back for The Flash that no one watched? He did, unfortunately. And going for a Dark Knight comparison, that trilogy is almost sacred now, that Nolan won't touch it, Bale won't touch it. That is not getting milked for whatever reasons, cameos, this, that, the other. It's so far separate. And Alien had the unfortunate, I guess you could say, the Dark Knight trilogy, sorry to bring Nolan back into it, but that was like him building his power within the industry, if we can even say that, like now, that, what that's done for his career and what he's done for the industry with that trilogy. He had power by the end of it to be like, I'm done. I'm finishing this. I'm moving on. And because this is a Fox film, because they went for a rookie director, which is insane to say now, we got Alien 4. And I don't mind even Alien versus Predator, but this is a definitive Tayte. I know you've not seen the fourth one. I don't know if you know anything about the fourth one.
I know it's set in the future, and I know that
all I'm going to say is cloning, Secrets the Sith knew, dark magic, all that. Okay, that's Alien 4.
Did it kill the franchise? Is that what it did? Or is it like, yes. I know they did AVP, but yeah.
I think
also, sorry, I just want to jump in, because I when you mentioned Fox, I just got what is it with Fox or now
exactly
what is it with them interfering with third films? Because they've done it with Spider-Man, X-Men.
That was Sony with Fox.
Oh, Sony, yes, sorry.
Sony was, but still, the logic's there. The logic's there. It's always the third film after the second one gets really big. And sorry, there's a screaming dog I can hear outside, but it probably just finished watching Alien 4. And it's one of them where it's not like they've rushed this film out after Alien 2 or Aliens, sorry. And we'll get into some behind the scenes in a moment, but it's really interesting that it seems, and where we are in 2023, right? We've just had Barbie come out. It's at the time of recording made 1.2 billion. It's gonna overtake Mario in the next month, I think, to be the highest grossing film this year. And the lesson the studios have learned is let's do the Mattel cinematic universe. Like, yes, Barbie was a success because it was about the Barbie doll. I mean, we know that's the reason it got big, but that is not why it's a box office phenomenon. It's a phenomenon because it's a good film as well, and people went out to watch it and rewatch it and get other people to watch it. No one wants to see, and I want to see, okay, maybe let's not use Barney the Dinosaur as an example. We're getting a Polly Pocket film or something, like every Mattel, we're getting an 8-ball film. It's ridiculous. And so many wrong lessons are learned. I think if Alien had ended with this third film, or maybe took a break until AVP, 12, 15 years later, whatever they wanted to do, at least would have had some finality to give it time so that maybe it could be reflected on in a different way. But because they went into the fourth film straight after, it undoes the ending of Alien 3, takes it out of context. And I know we're jumping ahead now. It happens a lot with these studios. And what it shows is that the studios meddling has been happening for as long as time's gone by. It's not just a recent thing.
One of the things that sorry to say one of the things that I was that you've sort of alluded to, the interference and the fact that the film itself had a what was it, something like a 4 or 5 year pre-production cycle where they just didn't know what they wanted to make. I think famously there's a trailer for the film which is on Earth people will hear you scream.
Is this the Fincher trailer where not a single shot's used in the film, and it's all in the
trailer?
No,
it's so they I think they released a trailer for Alien 3's in development with like the Earth, so people thought it was going to be set on Earth, but that was for a script that they rejected in the end and made a trailer from it. It's like, what? Well, you haven't got a script yet, and you're doing stuff like that?
To be perfectly honest, they could have set this film on Earth, and it wouldn't really have made too much of a difference.
Well,
it still could have been a prison colony, and nothing would have changed.
One of the scripts that they rejected for which was set on Earth is essentially the plot is essentially reused for AVP Requiem.
I haven't seen Requiem.
I've ever seen in my life.
I've seen AVP 1. I haven't seen Requiem.
I say this lightly. I don't. You know me. I don't go to bash films. I can and I will, but I don't openly. I go out to watch most entertainment. Alien vs Predator Requiem. I've seen it once in my life. It was 2008 or 09, whenever it came out. I will honestly say this right now. It is down there with Movie 43. It's one of the worst films I've ever witnessed in my entire lifetime. The film is based. You know how people moan about Game of Thrones being too dark for the Battle of Winterfell? This is the whole film where it's just dark and there's a alien baby and you can't see anything. That is what it's like to watch a film that's not been shot properly. But oh god, I mean, let's talk some behind the scenes because the behind the scenes for this is ridiculous. And we're gonna go back to Ridley Scott. So the first idea they wanted to shoot a 2-part Alien 3 and 4, which is very interesting from a concept behind the scenes because Alien and Aliens almost doubles up. They wanted a part 3 and 4 in theory.
Just very quickly, I could see this film being split into 2 parts. I could see this being
maybe not Alien 3, but I could see the idea or the concept of a 2-part Alien film. 100%. I'd love that. And
would
they
that
went
have
to
been
Ridley Scott.
Hold on, would that have been the first film made into a 2-part?
Godfather.
I think, wasn't it? So it was William Gibson's script, wasn't it? That he was writing that focused solely on Hicks to start with, and then the fourth one was gonna be Ripley focused. I think was it.
And whilst that was happening, Ridley Scott apparently he liked the idea, but his schedule was too busy, which is very interesting. Whether he's saying that I can't remember.
Yeah, that would have been good because one of the things that you get your stamp and I think I can't remember who said it, but I heard, or it's something I heard on like a YouTube video, I can't remember where from. But so you have a film before that to cement yourself as a talented guy, or a talented director rather, and then you're able to dictate how you want production to go and be like, I'm sole responsibility for this. I don't want any interference. But coming in as a first time, like your first feature or first mainstream feature, it's like you don't get that control. And I think wasn't it that there were more Fox execs on set than actors at one point,
Jeez,
dictating how the film was.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I guess
Because,
for them,
you know,
this was their massive franchise at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Fox did everything. Did Star Wars to a point. I mean, I know it was in between actually, so ignore that. But it's just one of those where I guess because Predator was what, 84 and 89? No, it wasn't. Or was it late 80s and early 90s? The two Predator films. So Fox had that happening for them. But what was interesting was, you mentioned the William Gibson scripts. I'm not going to go through everything. You can read so much about them online, and the William Gibson version is fascinating because that version of what his alien concept was ended up becoming a comic book series for the 40th anniversary in 2017, and they then turned that into an audio book featuring actors. Do they still call them audiobooks? I know there's like new terms where they do like drama stuff as well, don't they? So the William Gibson one is out there for people to find, and ironically, the timing couldn't be better. There was a WGA strike during production, so that obviously happened, of course, and he did leave the production. And there's a lot you can read into. As I said, you can purchase it to have a look online, but this is where it starts to get real messy. Really, really messy. Eric Red is brought on board. Now, I don't know everything these guys have wrote or what they've directed or what they're involved in. So apologies if these people, I can't recognize a couple names that are going to come up as well. But because of the strike as well, Eric Red was basically told, you've got 2 months to deliver your draft for the film. So he basically just gave up and he departed the series. Then David Twohy came up. Apologies if that's not how it's pronounced. I think he worked on Riddick. That's why I recognize that name. I don't know. I can't remember which one, but I definitely recognize the name from the Riddick films. And actually, Vin Diesel franchise that didn't go too extreme. He just became like Emperor of the Universe. But it was going to be about the Cold War, but something to do with aliens, and that's what I know. But he basically, like everybody else, he walked out. But his one, he didn't have Ripley in it. So we've already got at this point actors coming and going, characters coming and going. There's no clear progression. There's no clear ideas. And obviously, this is the Fox board who are then going to keep things going. So at this point, they then get Sigourney Weaver involved. She came back to them, obviously with her salary demands. And the really interesting thing here is she told them that Ripley can't be dependent on guns in this film, which I thought was very interesting, given maybe because we just had aliens, that you don't want to do the same film again. But the implication from that is that Sigourney Weaver wasn't involved for the first few versions, or at least it hadn't been ironed out. Maybe she was waiting on a script, who knows. But following on from that, we then get the Vincent Ward version of the film. Which
ludicrous version.
This is the wooden one. If anyone's read into it, I don't know if it's our jobs. I don't want to just go through like unmade alien film. He got fired from the project. They liked some of his ideas.
Yeah,
sorry, I'm so out of the loop on this. So honestly, briefly summarize it. Like
essentially, the film it's essentially the same sort of start. So Ripley crash lands on the EEV crash lands on a planet, but it turns out it's a satellite made entirely of wood, and that there are these wooden monks that live on this thing that have got rid of all technology, which begs the question: how are they surviving in space if everything's also made out of wood? They must have some technology because they obviously need to breathe. So, but if you read it, it's completely ludicrous. And I actually think I would have liked to have seen that, just how awful it would have been.
Can we get when what's it called? Colin
release the woodcuts.
Well, no, like when
like Colin Trevorrow's Star Wars.
Yeah, when they released that, they had people like going online and making like like
concept art,
yeah,
and
people just various different versions of the script. Can we do that for the woodcut?
Well, what makes it funnier is that Ward's woodcut. The studio sat him down, and was like, "We really need you to change this," and he just says no, so they fired him from the production. But they clearly liked some of his concepts. There's
monks,
a story
I guess,
in there because Crash Landing, this planet, the concept of the monks, the tapestry, they kind of took that. So then Walter Hill came on board with David Gillet, and this is where things get back into production. Wow. Sigourney Weaver didn't like their cut. So it's getting to this ridiculous point now. People coming and going. If you're watching at home, honestly, please read into this. You could do a whole pod. There's probably podcasts dedicated to like these unmade Alien 3 films.
Yeah.
But essentially, the next two that came on board brought in Fincher, who, again, at this point, he's a music video director. And they brought him on board to start writing over these guys' scripts. So they've got an idea. Then Fincher's coming on board. And in Fincher's spare time, he's now doing the screenplay himself. I think with just like a normal book author, not even... he directed Sideways, I think. No, he wrote Sideways. I forgot his name. The author of Sideways was working on Alien 3. So he was working with Fincher. And then, jumping ahead, why are we jumping ahead? Filming starts without script.
Rex Pickett.
So the filming dates are locked in. Rex Pickett, that's the name. So filming has begun without a finished script, and they've already spent $7 million shooting / going through ridiculous script here and there.
You say that, but like
first film.
Nowadays, that's fine. You can spend $7 million before you do anything. Like,
just what would $7 million be today compared to then? Like probably like 30, 40 million film industry
was it?
Budgets.
It was
91. You got to think 1991. They spent $7 million at that point. Inflation across a couple of years. That's insane for not to have the script at the time of shooting. But the really sad thing of all of this, and I guess we'll talk about this in Mank, Fincher wanted Gary Oldman in the film. Now, you talk in the early 90s, you've got bold British convicts. If you had Gary Oldman in this film, I think it would have completed it. I think he could have gone one-on-one with an alien and probably won back in the day. But it's one of those where it is an absolute train wreck of a production. Pre-production, all of it. And of course, filming itself, David Fincher didn't like how the film resulted. I know you both seen the assembly cut. They have to call it the assembly cut because Fincher refused to be involved for it to be a director's cut. And this is 2003, right? This comes out. They've gone and got cast over the years to come back and record new lines and stuff like that. And they basically just used David Fincher's notes from production to release the assembly cut. So that really goes to show you not how much Fox cocked it up, but also I guess it's a Christopher Nolan thing too, right? If you get this young director rookie who makes a film for you, ends up having an incredible career, you're thinking, we fucked up here, which is clearly what they did think.
I mean, from the sounds of the cast that were actually there. So I mean, Charles Dance.
They all speak highly of it.
Yeah, the actual filming and production. They thought they weren't necessarily aware of behind the scenes drama going on. So I mean, that's a testament, I think, to Fincher not letting stuff like that get into his
past
head.
It's like it's in the boardroom, but it's not finding its way to the set. And if it is, they're doing a very good job of hiding it. And I think, again, it's easier in retrospect as well to look there like 30 plus years later. Back then there's no social media. There's nothing like that for people to find out about these things. You find out when you find out. And it is interesting. Again, if people at home, we've had a few people that were commenting about some of the stuff. And on the announcement video, they were commenting a lot of them about Alien 3, which is really interesting. As I said, it does have its fans, but the behind the scenes, it's just, again, heading that into beginning his retrospective of this film and talking about all that in theory, his first film, was him just being brought on board because he'd done music videos. And to be fair, a lot of directors have done music videos. It's not uncommon. No different to advertising.
And after this, he didn't work with Fox again for like years and years and years until Fight Club.
Has he worked with them again?
Yeah, Fight Club was Fox.
Oh, it's Fox Fight Club. Okay, that's interesting. But I
think refused to work with until then. So
I had a very quick look. That would have been $15 million out of the 50-60 million budget. So you've almost spent 1/5 of the budget before you've even started production.
Yeah, and to go into the production without the script as well makes that even worse.
Actually, that's almost a quarter of the budget. That's ridiculous. Like,
this is it, and I think, again, I've watched the theatrical cut. It's different for me to try and pinpoint, people wouldn't have liked this back in the day. I don't know what people thought back then, but if I'm going to go with modern audiences, they've seen Alien, they've seen Aliens. They're probably expecting the third one to be like a masterpiece.
The grand finale.
Yeah, and you've got to think, contextually, both when, not Fincher, sorry, when Ridley Scott did Alien very early into his career, James Cameron, his third film, he did it just after Terminator, I think, based off when we did the series, which, he'd done Piranha 2 before then. So James Cameron's not the household name he is now and goes on to be. So it is interesting as the years went by that the directors that Fox had hired had all ended up, doing quite well after working on an Alien film. But it's one of those where, if we get into the direction, I'll actually talk about Fincher himself. What do you guys think in respect of direction itself for his opening film of his career, his first film? Again, it's a follow-up to Aliens. That's not going to make it easier for anyone. I don't think the direction is bad. I don't think that's my problem with this film. And this is where I've struggled. I rewatched this on Sunday. For context, we're recording on Tuesday night. And I just felt very neutral watching it. But I could certainly watch this film and there was like, okay, the really obvious one is the title sequence, which is amazing. Everyone knows that Fincher makes unbelievable title sequences. And that's something you wouldn't have known back in the 90s. And I think the issue with this film is more the story points, which were probably preconceived, which is, again, they've already crash landed onto the planet. They've killed off Newt. They've killed off Hicks. It's just going to be Ripley by herself. And look, there's an alien there with them, which we know they're going to do. I like Fincher's approach. I like the set design. I like what his approach is. I like, again, the actors he's got involved. The direction isn't bad. It's his first film. There's a lot of competency there. And I think it's easier for us 30 years later to look back and say, yeah, we could see a sign of what's coming. But it is very interesting that, like George Lucas, and this is a weird comparison now, his first film, George Lucas's early films were completely meddled with by the studio. Ironically, was it Fox that did American Graffiti? Where George Lucas, that turned him into the, I need full creative control. I'm doing everything my own way. I'm not having the studios involved. They don't tell me what to do. Because of this, I'm going to now make my own edits to my own films. It makes me wonder if Fincher's career needed Alien 3 to get it going. It's almost this, hey, this industry is like full of shit people above you. Stamp your authority. Because we'll talk about stories of this where, some actors are doing 50, 60 takes of a film and it's sending them into like insanity that it has to be perfect for Fincher. And I wonder if part of his perfectionist trait came from maybe his experiences on Alien 3, if that makes any sense.
I was going to say, there's no way he's making Seven like as his first film if he doesn't have this film kind of under his belt already and he's able to immediately go to, New Line Cinemas and go, I want full creative control. I want to make it my way. There's not a chance. And like you said, the aesthetic of this film was actually really cool. I love the set design. I love the cinematography behind it. Some of the editing is a bit choice at some points. I like some of it. I don't like some of the other bits. Like, I don't really enjoy the kind of POV stuff that they use in the film. It's a bit, not quite polished and stuff like that. But as far as the film's concerned, it has everything going for it. It should have everything going for it. And when you kind of consider that, you've got to turn around and think, well, it's got to be the studio that's the problem then. It's got to be where the problem stems from, because he hasn't done a bad job directing here. It isn't, the actor's fault or anything like that. It just seems to be kind of certain parts of the story beats, certain decisions made and stuff like that, but just don't quite work. And, it's interesting. It's really, really interesting because for his first film, like I said at the start, you pick up on very, very interesting director's traits, which, he uses throughout all of his films later on, different tints and kind of the coloring and stuff like that, use of shadow work and use of really, really dark colors everywhere and stuff like that. Like extreme close-ups. There's so much stuff that you kind of get from this film that you will get later on in his career in all of his other films. So it's really, really interesting to see that kind of at the very, very start, and he uses that all the way through his career. It's not like, you know, when we did the James Cameron retrospective, when you look at Piranha 2, there is nothing you can take from that film. Absolutely nothing. You can see stuff in this film. It's not a bad first outing. So the problem, I guess, then lies, you know, with the studio itself.
Yeah, obviously you speak about that retrospectively because you pick things out from earlier works, and obviously the traits and things aren't that well established within first films. They're it's still honing craft. Although he did do music videos for, as you said, Madonna, Michael Jackson, George Michael. So had a few of those under the belt, but whether his style from the music videos translates to the big screen is the question. Obviously, it did, given his career. I think you can obviously see some of his key stylistic traits and choices in this, and obviously they'll get honed over the years. I think actually, I remember reading somewhere that he quit filmmaking after this, essentially, until New Line. He said, New Line came with, you can have creative freedom on 7.
He the story is that he told his agent he will never direct a film again in his life after how bad Alien 3 was, and he didn't consider 7 until his agent brought him the script, and then he said he didn't like the script until basically it got towards the end when John Doe's plan gets sort of more in depth and you start to see more from it. So we're quite lucky because if he wasn't given that script, maybe there's no David Fincher in respect to film directing. But it is interesting, and to his credit, when you see interviews of him and you see him talking in his sort of commitment to his projects, and as again that perfectionist is going to be a word that's said a lot. It's almost in that statement there, right, that he had such a terrible experience with his first film. No, I'm done with this, and I kind of respect that off the go. That it was, okay, I tried it, got put by the studio. Not going to ever do it again. And I wonder, there's probably been loads of directors like that in the past that we just have never heard of, or have done like nothing, or just do Netflix films now, or something like that. So it is interesting that how close it could be to being so different. And certainly, like, one of the things I associate with Fincher as well is the performances in his films. I don't want to use the term he's an actor director because people sort of overuse that without knowing what that really means. But normally, the lead actors in a Fincher film, you can look at them and say that they're some of the best performances of their career. That's how I see a lot of his work and his approach to it. Whether that's the quality of the script, maybe it's the actor's attraction to a script, or maybe to work under him. But it's one of those where talking Sigourney Weaver in this again, his first film, and he's got a household name as someone that's played Ripley twice before. Her performance isn't bad at all. Actually, there's a lot of depth to performance, that you've got her grieving over the loss of the other characters, and it's really interesting for me that there are still signs of it coming together. And again, Tom, you might be best with this because you've seen both cuts. Is it the editing suite that makes the difference? I mean, I know he didn't work on the assembly cut, but the logic of it being more akin to his style than theirs. Because my understanding is Fox basically took over the edit in post.
Yeah. I mean, so if we're going into differences, so one of the key things is that the story is altered slightly. So there's 30 more minutes added to the film, and one of the key things that they wanted to use originally, they wanted to use an ox or a bull or something for the alien to burst out of. That happens in the assembly cut. They filmed some of it, but I think they had trouble with animals during reshoots and had to change it to a dog. So the dog is in the theatrical cut, but not in the assembly cut, which is weird because there's and I find it really bizarre because there's a scene where obviously the guy is scraping off rust from inside the pipe, and you obviously know that his dog is there. Or at least his dog is a factor in this, but in the assembly cut, right? He's scraping this off. Here's the looks down and Spike, is that you? Is that you, Spike? and you have no context because who's Spike? We haven't seen Spike.
But I guess you could say Spike is a person. It could be anything in that context.
It could be a dog. It could be one of the 25 replaceable people in the prison. I think they would, if they kept at least some reference to it in. I think that's a change that I don't necessarily get. So the whole middle of the film is reworked. So they trap the alien in the toxic waste place, and you know the guy that's in the straitjacket in the hospital bed when Charles Dance gets
Paul McGann.
Up. Yeah. He is nowhere to be seen in the theatrical cut after that. But he escapes, or he gets let out because they obviously find out that he didn't do the murders, and he's the one to let the alien out. But they just completely ditch that bit of plot, and he's nowhere to be seen.
It's a really, really interesting plot beat because I really enjoyed that plot beat. I really enjoyed the character as well, because you see him starting to go kind of a little bit kind of insane, purely out of the fact of like he's been placed in a situation, he doesn't understand why. He becomes obsessed with the alien, and then he goes and kills the person guarding the toxic waste area. So, and you see him like apologizing for it and stuff like that. Like he's really kind of like, you know, he's obsessed with what's kind of caused him to be blamed for kind of killing people and what's kind of given him a mental breakdown. And he has his own mental breakdown because of it, and that's what lets the alien loose again. So that the fact that isn't even in the cut that I haven't seen, that's so weird to think about, because that was like a massive point. It's a huge point in the film. It breaks up the film nicely because you've got downtime between them being chased by the alien, and you've got some nice moments in that time where kind of, you know, the characters are talking about their situation and talking about how they're going to deal with it and how they're going to get out, and you know, is that the scene where they're trying to chat with Weyland-Yutani and they're trying to get instructions and what to do and stuff like that? Yeah.
So that's a bit that's missed out of the theatrical cut, George, right? So after the big explosions and that, it just hard cuts to them all standing there going, "Oh, what the fuck are we gonna do?" And all arguing. But they actually have a little section after that where they contact Weyland-Yutani and go, "What? We've trapped it. What do we do?" And they get a response saying, "Do not terminate." And then this whole thing happens. It's bizarre.
It's wildly different. It's almost like oh god, do I dare say the name? Not the Snyder Cut, but it's very different circumstances. But it's always fascinated me how the concept of a director's cut has been massacred in modern day, because it's full of these awful DVD extras where it's like, look at the Fast and Furious 6 director's cut. It's like 3 minutes longer. They just stuck a deleted scene into like the main disc. That's not a director's cut. And in the same time, because of the Snyder Cut now, every time a film comes out, the director says, looking at you, David Ayer and Suicide Squad, your film was crap before. Sometimes the reason changes were made is because of that reason. You know, you put damaged on the Joker's forehead, you have no place to bargain about what version would have been better, because either way, that's there. And the social media explosion, whatever you want to call it, with the Snyder Cut, has sort of lost the art of a director's cut. They're not there to be a thing. They're not there for attachment. They're there for extra money. It's normally like, if a director wants to revisit their work, I'm all for it. If they've maybe like... I understand the logic as well that the original should be available to watch akin to a director's cut. You know, I'm looking at Apocalypse Now, where there's been 3 versions. I've got the 4K one, which is like the last modern version that Coppola's done. And it really fascinates me that sometimes the same film could be so wildly. Yeah.
That's crap. It's fucking
no,
5 hours of nonsense.
So they did the Redux cut about 15, 20 years ago, and then for the 4K in 2019, they did I think they've just called it the Final Cut. I think they've just settled on Final Cut now. Whatever the name of it is I can't read it. The writing's too small.
But it Blade Runner's the famous one of the famous ones, isn't it? Yeah,
best
various
example.
Different cuts of the film.
And you know, Ridley Scott's got a lot of cuts for a lot of films, and it's one of them where you know, when it's studio interference, it's very different. And I don't know why I've gotten to this topic.
Sorry,
but
that's right. I just want to come back to what you mentioned Ridley Scott there, and fucking Fox Kingdom of Heaven. the theatrical version.
That's the one I always get told about.
It's so bad. But the cut that he actually put together is actually really good. Really good. It's like an hour longer.
And that's
but
what's
still.
interesting. But sometimes that's what it takes. And, Scorsese's one, right? I mean, I know we're talking about Curse the Fly in the next couple of months, but he had to shop around to get creative control, to get the budget to make that film on Apple, sorry. And Apple had given him the budget. They've let him make his film. Credit, I watched rewatched The Irishman recently. Incredible film. And that is, no studio's going to let him make that film in that way. And I like the fact, as bad as streaming services can be, that there is more freedom allocated to directors. But sometimes you do need studio interference. I'm not saying every film, but sometimes the director needs to be told, Zach, you can't have Batman and Superman stop fighting because their mother share the same name. That's not going to work.
Well, I suppose one of the things that you have people there to not necessarily restrict, but say, for example, you
advise.
Have you thought about doing something different because that might not necessarily be in our budget? So is there a workaround? In the more limitations, I think the you can get more creative with what you do. But when there's so much interference that you're like, well, why don't you direct the film?
And that's it. It's the difference, right, of having a proper producer and then having an executive producer, which is your boardroom suits. Real producer knows exactly what's got to be done, what's got to be switched, what's going to work for the budget. Spielberg will always talk about Kathleen Kennedy in that retrospect. A lot of directors work with the same producers for those very reasons. It's more of a trust pattern that they're taking into account the film as well as what they're making. And a lot of the time it is like this, where it is studio manipulation. And it kind of makes it weird talking about the story for this, because I don't think the story is that bad. Again, the alien films are slasher films, right? We got ourselves a new location. We got ourselves a new planet. We got a new type of people. I've got no issue with the story as a whole. Obviously, the biggest story issue people will jump to is, of course, killing off Hicks and Newt off screen. And there was something recently where they spoke about it. I can't remember what film came out, but it was brought up where one of the actors or the director was like, we were just making sure we didn't do what happened in Alien 3. And I cannot remember for the life of me what film it was. And it's going to re-annoy me now. But it came up recently in a couple of articles for either a series or a show or a film or something. But until it comes back to me. Sorry. Do you want to talk characters?
Sorry. Before that, I was going to say, famously, Michael Biehn didn't allow them to use his likeness when the thing crashed. So instead of his head being,
they just cover his face, don't they?
Yeah. So instead, they use his picture, and they had to pay him like millions for that.
Jesus.
Fair play.
Jesus.
Residuals. That's why we're on strike, guys.
Yeah.
That's different, though. That's different. But it's like with the strikes of story, like the guy that Power Rangers, there's a villain that used to be on a TV screen. He got paid one day's work for like $50 to $100, and then he was used across the entirety of a Power Ranger series and never got paid for it. He was like a main character. So, this sort of stuff does exist. It is tricks by the studio. And when the studios are caught out, believe me, they've got the money to pay and balance those books. It's called Hollywood accountancy.
Yeah.
But talking characters, I'm not going to go through. Oh, sorry,
can we very quickly talk about the decision made to,
yes,
kill off
one of the biggest monstrosities in cinema history? That's my thoughts on that.
It's odd because I can accept it within the film itself, purely out of the fact that we do get the funeral scene, and I like the fact that the funeral scene kind of parallels Death and Rebirth and having the alien come back for the final time, if this is to be said the final film of the trilogy. I'm okay with that. I'm completely okay with that. But I can also understand how you had these two characters established in one film and you're just immediately killing them off, and there's no kind of real consequence for that apart from one funeral scene, and that's it. I mean, Ripley's been through the motions. I think I was talking to Tom about this beforehand. Ripley has been through the motions with these films up to this point. She's lost her entire crew in the first film. She's lost the entire crew in the second film and has at least gained what you could say is almost a family, some kind of support system. Just to lose it all again in the third film off screen is a bit, if they're going to kill off the characters, I know down to the actors whether they come back or not, But if you're able to bring them back and you are going to kill them off, at least kill them off and make them have a massive impact on the story. Like, how brutal would it have been if, you know, for example, one of the characters ended up with the alien inside them and that was the chest bursting scene, she had to go through that all over again? Or how brutal would it have been if this was a two-parter and the first part ended with one or both of their deaths? I know that's us looking back on it in a modern film perspective, but like, it's interesting choices like that in the film that would have at least upped the stakes. Because realistically, the stakes in this film, and this is one of the only issues I have with it, is you've done something amazing by making Ridley have, you know, the alien queen inside her, like having that to be able to birth some new aliens and stuff like that. You've done something fantastic there. Excellent, great plot point. But she's the only character that I care about in the film. So now the stakes are zero. Like, she wants to die anyway. She's going to die. The stakes are not there anymore. I don't care about any of the other characters. I really don't. The only character I really cared about was Charles Dance because they gave him a bit of character towards the start. And then they killed him off before the stakes even got raised. So it's like, second half of the film, I'm just like, okay, just waiting for these people to get picked off. I wonder which randomly 2 selected characters will be there at the end. And then it's like, you know, what do we do now? There's nothing left. You've left no characters who have any kind of relevance to the plot to, you know, have any sacrifices or really have any, you know, positive impact towards the story. And if you'd have kept one of those characters along the way, then at least there would have been, you know, a character you cared for that could die. At that point, it's just Ridley, and you know she's going to die because she's got the alien inside her, and also she can't be killed by the alien because the alien doesn't want to. So it's like, you know, what next?
I suppose my issue with it is that it's it feels to me the 2 deaths at the start are underutilized throughout the. Obviously, you've got the 2 scenes of Ripley wanting to see them, to have an autopsy on Newt, and also the funeral. But after that, it doesn't seem like it's very much utilized in terms of a motif or theme. So one of the things that I thought would have been interesting, and obviously this is hypothetical because this isn't the film that we've got. The film we've got is the one that's we're obviously talking about. But as a hypothetical, I would have found it probably interesting if motherhood was more of a focus, and that she's lost one daughter, but in fact that she's birthing a new horrible, weird one, and that the alien queen thing should have been at the start, so that motif carries through and loss leads to rebirth and stuff like that. That's what I thought would have potentially been more interesting. Obviously, that idea, you know, if I was to write it, would be fleshed out over months before shooting even began. But that's just sort of how I thought the story might improve, just by adding that little touch of theming in it.
And that's a really good point you mentioned, is that the writings, they didn't get the time. Ironically, they went through so many writers, but clearly where there's an idea worth developing, the development never got the chance to be done because it was being done on set at the time of filming. And kind of in line that, just what I was able to work out what film it was we're talking about. Light to Fuse podcast did an interview with Simon Pegg, and they were talking about Mission Impossible 4. For the context of that thing earlier about the characters killed off screen, when Chris McCrory came on board to basically rewrite it on set, Michelle Monaghan, the wife from Mission Impossible 3, was killed off genuinely. Wasn't going to be at the end, wasn't going to be saved for Jeremy Renner. She was killed off screen, and Chris McCrory was like, no, that invalidates Mission Impossible 3. We're not doing that. Tom Cruise agreed. And that's how she ended up being in it. So, and they actually pinpointed Alien 3 as the reference, that they didn't want to do it because of Alien 3.
There you go.
So, you know, it's one of those. And you know, and that's a writer. Yes, he'd won an Oscar at that point, Chris McCrory, but he wasn't directing a lot at that point. That's him telling Tom Cruise to change something. And he did. So yeah, it's interesting, and that's probably the story of this film. There's a story there. It's just never fully executed, and I think the series deserves better, right? Not just the director at this point. Like the Alien series deserves better because it is a great concept. It's again 2 of the best sci-fi films ever made. massive for not just the genre, but I guess you could even argue like British filmmaking as well, for the careers that happened to Ridley Scott, James Cameron. It's such a shame. And kind of sticking with that, we spoke a bit about Ripley. I said I think Sigourney Weaver's solid in this. The no guns thing didn't catch me off guard, but I don't know if it's intended comedy vibe, but I love the fact that we're in this prison, this high security prison, but there's actually no weapons to then fight an alien with. I actually quite like that. As silly as it is, there's something about that which, because Aliens goes out there so extreme, right? You've got Corporal Marines, they've got the best gun with the best sound effects ever, one of the best sound effects ever in cinema. How do you get past that? You've got to sort of strip everything away, take it back to its basics, and nothing is, I guess, as basic as a prison where they hate women who don't want any women to be there. They're all
and just one
rebirths. One alien, exactly. And I quite like that. And I think, again, issues can go to the writing of the story, that the ensemble casts I quite like. Again, are you going to top the Colonial Marines? Probably not. But some of the actors, I mean, talking Charles Dance, plays the character Dr. Clements in this. First time I watched this, Game of Thrones hadn't been out. So going back, I was like, oh my God, it's Charles Dance in Alien. And then he's gone pretty much straight away. And the most amazing thing about this, none of you two know this, the role was first offered to Rich D. Grant. And there would have been a With an A and I reunion.
I could see that. I could see him in that character.
Richard E. Grant in an Alien film would be incredible. He'd be the first character to befriend an alien. Like, there's no way that Alien would go for him. But I like the ensemble, but none of them get any development other than being like, you can't murder her, she's a woman. And that's the issue. You could do so much more with prison. And then I'm going to go to Tayte and say, but I watched the theatrical cut, right? You guys have just told me loads about Paul McGann having development in this assembly cut. Me, there's nothing. He's just this weird guy that ran away screaming, was put in a straitjacket, and that's it. Like,
yeah, for us, he actually has a character. It's wild. A really interesting character.
That's wild. That's wild for me. So it's insane that the two different cuts have done that. But again, it just reeks of potential that just never got met with.
Yeah.
It's interesting as well that, you know, two of the biggest side characters are both called Charles D. Just putting it out there, you know. But no, I guess those are the only two, with the character of Leonard and Dr. Clemens, those are the only characters you kind of actually care about at all. I guess there's the character who was at the end, who I've completely forgotten the name of now, who was pretty good as well.
The guy that gets killed by them all when he...
Morse.
I mean...
as an interesting character towards the end. But yeah, I feel like there wasn't enough time given to the characters who needed time, should we say, needed a bit of fleshing out. And genuinely, I saw the cast list before going into the film. I saw Charles Dance. I was like, great. He's like second billing here. This is going to be fantastic. I'm waiting for like a powerhouse performance by him. Guess what? He gets killed off just as his character is getting interesting, and just as you're starting to understand and learn about him. I don't know if I missed it. Why was he in the prison? I wanted that answered. I don't know if they answered it or can't remember, because he was gone immediately after. That's all I remember from it. Like, it would have been so nice to see kind of him do more in the film, you know, having to question that kind of, do we actually kill Ripley now that we know that she's got another one inside her kind of thing, and having those kind of moral questions hanging over them. Like, they're all reformed and stuff like that, and now they have to go and kill again. And there was so many different routes they could have taken with it, but they chose the most boring route possible.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just saying he's easily one of the best things in it. And just to bring it back to everybody else, that because he's got that development, you know who he is, and obviously because he's still got a slight bit of his hair still that you recognize him. Everybody else is so interchangeable. The only ones you sort of really recognize, I would say, are Pete Post-Heatherwhite, and I saw Phil Davis.
His character's name is his surname. His character's name is his surname, by the way. That sort of sums it up. His character's called David Post-Heatherwhite. And I'm just...
lazy.
But he's hardly in it. But then if he's in the assembly cut more, I'd understand that. But
he's not. They don't get any more like.
It's like he just turned up on set one day. Like he's in the corner room. It's like, is that Pete Bottlesmate? Like, I mean, as a kid, to me, that was always the dude from James the Giant Peach. That's how I knew him for many years until I got older. But it's just one of those where it's a pretty spectacular British cast, right? The names they've got, and not just the regional accents to bring it back to that, but I quite like the fact that they've gone for this very different thing. And I don't want to sit here and say remake it. I hate that sort of conversation, but I'm trying to think of another horror. I know it's a franchise, which makes this a bit easier, but when you get like a cast this stacked in British, like in a third film in a series, because if I'm right with Aliens, the cast, they weren't big names contextually in the mid-80s. I think that launched the careers of a lot of the actors in Aliens. And obviously Alien itself, you had a lot of British actors, of course, some legends in there as well. So it's really interesting that they come back this third one, and we've got another sort of wave of British talent, and I just don't think they're given justice for what they could have had. I know I'm sort of generalising. I keep mentioning Rick Ollie. If anyone doesn't know that, that's Ralph Brown, who was in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Still can't ever take him seriously in anything else because it'll always be Rick Ollie to me. But not to sound like I'm just pushing for it. Are there any other characters of people I want to talk about? Because I don't, because they feel, so many of them feel just so two-dimensional. Like, we're in prison, there's 25 of you. I like the warden because he's going to get the comical death, and they deliver on it.
Do we talk about the reintroduction of actual Bishop in the film?
Oh yeah. I thought that was quite good. I really like Lance Henriksen. I think he's great, and I really enjoy what he's been in. But no, I think that's a good. I actually think that's a good reveal as well. That to try and bring Ripley off the edge, they bring someone that she's known before, but this time he's actually a human. I actually quite like that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily add much, but it's always good to see Lance back in something.
Dare I say, it also heightens kind of the evilness of the corporation.
Yeah.
And kind of you can't trust anything from the corporation because they will always be out there to try and kind of get the alien back and test it.
Also, his makeup at the end, where he gets hit over the head and his ears like hanging off, and I thought, how's this guy like? He's like standing there talking normally after that. Like, well, he should. I thought it was when I rewatched it yesterday because I watched the theatrical cut yesterday evening. I thought he's definitely an android. He's like standing there talking normally when he's got half his ear hanging off. And then
if they'd have made the blood kind of milk colored as like a re-edit, that would have been a really cool ending. Kind of another deception on top of that.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. You're right in that respect, Tate, that it adds to the sort of the duplicity of Weyland-Yutani and the court and as a corporation, and they'll play on your emotions just to get what they want.
I guess, and then extension of that, not another character, but I guess we could talk about the death at the end. I mean, it's meaningless because she gets brought back through the powers of cloning, apparently, in Alien 4, as you told me just now. But, like, for a finale to the series, her sacrificing herself, I mean, she's been wanting to sacrifice herself throughout the entire film. She literally walks up to the alien and tries to prod it, and he's just like, nah, you're good, mate. So, like, having her kind of sacrifice herself at the very end, kind of knowing that they can't shoot her or hurt her because they'll kill the alien inside. So she just gets the opportunity to, close the circle, close the story. She's lost everyone, but at least she saved as many people as she could.
Yeah.
And the evil corporation doesn't win.
Yeah, is that I do like it as well, and actually that is something that's changed as well from the theatrical. So in the theatrical, she has the alien burst out of her chest when she's falling, and grabs hold of it.
Oh.
And in the assembly cut, she just
it's really bad.
Yeah.
Oh God, no!
No.
I didn't realize that was a change.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that was a change because it's really stupid. Because the way I read it in the theatrical cut is like the alien sensing it's going to die, so it's trying to like live, which is a bit too deep and film languagey. Like it's sort of nonsense you have at school when it's like really read into the scene, says the English teacher about Shakespeare. It's like that where it's the self-sacrifice, and then the alien's like, but then it just goes the same way as Gollum is the lava wither.
No, but this cut, the cut that I saw, the assembly cut, she just falls back and then she just dives into the flames and you don't see anything. It's really poetic. It's quite symbolic because she's in like the cross shape as well. And I know that they use a lot of symbolism in this film to do with religion and faith. So that works out well. And there's no like loud screaming of like no or anything like that. It's just the music playing, and it's really kind of, it's a fitting end to the character. That's really weird. The chest burster comes out. No, that's not right. George, you're gonna have to, George, I'm telling you now, I know it's probably going to be a little while before you watch it, but you will have to watch the assembly cut at some stage because it does change the film.
I'll do it before the new Alien film comes out next year. Because I'm excited for the Alien film next year. It's apparently going to be like completely different. I forgot the name of the director working on it, but I am excited for the new Alien film. And they need to really release that 4K box set because Aliens needs to be out 4K. Aside from characters, I don't know if anyone's got much to say on the score, but it's composed by Elliot Goldenthal. I've seen a lot of his films, but he did Heat. I know that. Batman and Robin are the two that jump to my mind. Basically, it's a lot of films with Michael Mann. I didn't really notice the score. Don't mean that to sound horrible. I loved the title sequence, the music being played in that, but to me, that's more of a Fincher thing, that his title sequences are always like as exciting as the films are, quite unnerving. But I don't have anything to say on the score, if I'm being really honest. I don't know if that's me being unfair or not.
No, you're not being unfair on it. I think the only memorable piece of music in it is obviously the title sequence, and that's it. Everything seems to sort of blur into the background. And with this, I think you have to accentuate the horror of it, and it doesn't quite do that. It's just generic sort of sci-fi, sci-fi music.
I was going to say, you recognize it at the start, but this film uses silence to the best. These Alien films don't really need a big booming score, do they? They make use of good silence and good horrors. So you don't really want to recognize the score from any of these films because you're really focused in on, the horror aspect of it, the kind of the element of, silence and, the whole in space, no one can hear you scream aesthetic. If you suddenly hear music whilst people are being massacred, it just takes that away.
Well, it works. Yeah, it works for Aliens because obviously it's more bombastic, so you need something to accentuate that as well.
Just throw the Doom soundtrack over the top of it. It's excellent.
But I wanted to leave Alien too. But moving on from score, we can do this section because we couldn't really do it on the other one. I can agree with a film. Sorry, we couldn't do it on Mission Impossible because it was a bit different. We're gonna talk box office. So the budget for this was 50 to 60 mil. It's not been nailed down, but you know what Hollywood's like. Now we know a good chunk of that was the script, which is ridiculous. The unfinished script, so we say. Ended up grossing 160 mil worldwide. Still a profit. It still made its money back, but it is the lowest grossing Alien film ever made. Obviously unadjusted for inflation, but still, that surprised me. I thought Covenant was rock solid at the bottom. It wasn't. It's this one. And it did pick up one Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. Can you understand that? We've got some of these early use of visual effects with the Alien. I know that it won't have aged as well. You can see it sort of rotoscoped into the scenes. But
sorry, George. Wait a sec. Your mic's going.
Is it gone to the tin thing again?
It's gone to the tin thing. Not sure if that's fixed it or not, but George, we're getting a bit of technical difficulties with George at the moment, so we will try and fix that in a minute. Impact on release. Well, what we can talk about is kind of how well it's received nowadays. And at the moment, it's currently sitting at like a 6.4 on IMDb. It's sitting at very mid-level kind of ratings across the board in most different places, which I guess depending on the version of the film that you've watched, especially with a lot of people now watching it on Disney Plus, they're going to be watching the original cut. And that's definitely going to have a massive difference if there is a more superior version out there to the film. So it's going to make it really difficult for people to actually watch a cut that people can actually get on board with. And I guess, Tom, you've seen both cuts, therefore you can have that kind of...
I think obviously the things get better with time, you know, and things get worse with time as well. Given that this was 30 plus years, well, 31. Actually, this came out the year I was born as well, a couple of months after I was born. So that's something to talk about, I guess. What I was gonna say was that the film obviously received a mixed reaction upon release, but I think people's views of it have changed over the years, and that audiences and critics have come around on the sort of ideas that it's trying to get across. Obviously, it's okay, but that's probably the best thing you can say about it, is that it's okay, it's all right. It's not as good as 1 or 2 or Alien and Aliens, but it's fine. I think people were obviously quite sniffy because it was a big franchise movie at the time. But I think in retrospect, people have definitely come around on it, especially after the hideousness of Alien Resurrection. Also, just quickly, how the hell was this nominated for Best Visual Effects? Like, the alien shots, the CG alien shots were shit.
Yes, but
it's 1992, isn't it?
At the time, it probably would have been pretty cool.
But then you had Terminator 2.
Yeah, this is after Terminator 2, isn't it?
Yeah. So I obviously, you know, people. Right. So when I say they're bad, obviously the work put into it is obviously the, you know, people's hard work that I'm just dumping on. But when you're looking at the final product, not the work that they put in. So, but I mean, in terms of things that came out around that time, I'm sure there was more groundbreaking.
Quite a weak year. It lost to a film called Death Becomes Her. And also nominated was Batman Returns. The year after, Jurassic Park. The year before, Terminator 2. Bit of an off year. Sorry, folks. And 1995, though, winner, beat Apollo 13, Babe, Pig in City. Sorry, I just love that film. George, the guy that did Mad Max, who then made Babe, will never be able to get over that in a life.
Yeah. No.
But it is one of them, yeah. With the Oscar nomination, it's probably because it's Alien, right? We know nowadays most of the time they fill that 5 with franchise films, don't they? It's whatever one they've seen, they can chuck in that box quicker. But yeah, it's not the best at all. And you didn't really get to see it much in that theatrical cut too. But just talking this film, we talk about how it's been perceived. Obviously, you guys have mentioned the different cuts. For the life of me, I'm very surprised Disney Plus just didn't have this assembly cut. I did look for it. And most of the positive reviews I've seen on my Letterboxd account are actually people that have specified they're watching the assembly cut. So it's just something peculiar that it wouldn't cost the streaming service anything to have that version on there as well.
Yeah,
that's
I was just gonna ask: is that a problem with other things as well, like other cuts not being on streaming? So obviously you want.
I don't know. I've never looked for them. I mean, obviously you've got Zack Snyder's Justice League, a HBO. Sorry, it's not called HBO Max anymore. A Max exclusive Zack Snyder's Justice League cut, which is on a 1:43 one aspect ratio, which doesn't work on tellies at home. Just to really tell people about that, it really doesn't work. It's a square image. It looks ridiculous. But yeah, it's quite worrying. I have seen films on there where it gives you the option of different versions. Yeah. Whether that's Disney Plus, I don't know. But again, if you're searching Alien 3 and that's the only one that comes up, it should have given you the option of both because they own the rights to it. Why can't it be on there? It's just giving people the options. But you know what? It is a great reminder of what I'm going to plug. If you have Alien 3 assembly cut on DVD or Blu-ray, it doesn't matter. It's not on Disney Plus because you own it. And that's the reminder to people. They're probably saying, what's this dickhead saying he's watching on Disney for when he's just doing a series about buying films? I had an Alien box set. I just don't anymore. Yeah. And it was on there, which just makes it more annoying. Like Aliens has an extended cut as well, I think.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so it adds the whole Ripley daughter aspect in it. So she has a discussion with I've forgotten his name, but he tells her that her daughter's essentially dead.
Yeah. And then that led way to the great Alien game on PS4 a couple of years ago. That was terrifying. It's Alien Isolation. I couldn't finish that game. I won't lie. I was not good at that game.
Was everywhere for a few years.
But I did buy Alien Colonial Marines, and that was the first ever time I told myself
that was terrible. That was the terrible game, right?
That was me saying I would never ever pre-order a game again. People learn from Cyberpunk. I learned from Colonial Marines. Doesn't matter how good that sound effect is; it's not going to make any difference. But talking about this, it's not really relevant, I guess, to me or Tate. We've both seen one cut each. Tom, I'm going to ask you this question before we do a favorite scene and final thoughts. Has your opinion on this film ever changed? I don't know. Maybe the first ever time you saw it. I know you said you couldn't really remember, but do you know when you found out about the assembly cut from theatrical, and maybe people watching at home as well? Because I think this is one that, again, if I watch the assembly cut, I'll probably have a better experience with it. But also, I feel that time is like one of the biggest allies of cinema. I've always felt like that your mindset is going to be different a year, 2 year apart, and whenever you watch something. So I would be curious 30 years later with Alien 3. And it goes back to what we said at the beginning, right? That if there wasn't a fourth film, maybe this would be completely different as time's gone by. This ending for this character, for the series. Or for at least Ripley's trilogy, it would have been known maybe. I don't know.
So, I mean, here's the thing. I remember... So I don't necessarily remember when I first watched it, but I remember liking the theatrical cut, and I still. So my opinion hasn't necessarily changed. I can see its issues, and obviously the obvious caveat is that the assembly cut of the film is far better. Obviously, it still has its problems because the production of it was so monstrous, but my opinion hasn't changed. I still like it. I still think it's got its place, and it adds to the world, it adds to the mythos, especially how everything is aesthetically still the same. So everything remains industrial. So in the first one, very industrialized ships, very machine heavy, very retro. Second one as well, similar sort of aesthetic theme, and it's continued in this one. So I think it does have its place. My opinion hasn't changed. I still enjoy it. I still like it. It's definitely not as good as 1 or 2, and is definitely, as far as I'm aware, I haven't. There are some Finch films that I've not seen, Mank being one of them. That it's his easily his worst film. Country Mile.
Would you say it was his worst film?
I would say that. Yeah.
I would say that. I've seen all but 3. I think I've not seen Benjamin Button, Panic Room, and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo somehow. And certainly the ones I have seen. I've
seen Benjamin Button. I wasn't the biggest fan the first time I watched it through.
That's the one where it's born backwards, right?
Yeah.
I'm dreading that. I'm not lying. I didn't want
to. That also is
probably fine.
Is quite good.
It was loved at the time. People.
I remember it. I remember it everywhere. Like I remember it. Trailers on telly everywhere. It was, and people would use it. People would use Benjamin Button to call certain footballers when we were at school. That's what I remember.
James Milner, Benjamin Button of the football world.
That's a compliment to Milner, to be fair. I'll give that, but not the way I remember people calling people Benjamin Button. That's aside from that, does anyone have a favorite scene? I'm sorry, I'm taking it. The title sequence. There we go. I really don't have much more, and I know it's got its fans, so I'm not sitting here to mock them. I want to hear what people think, but for me, it's not even a disrespect. There is an art to a title sequence that is so severely lost in modern day. Even the Bond films, when Bond films are at their best, they're great, but you know you're going to get it with the Bond film. But when we're going to get to talk about 7 in the next couple of weeks, like,
oh yeah,
his title sequences, like, that's why can't people make good title sequences anymore? That's a really like old man yells at cloud type thing, isn't it? And someone's going to pinpoint a really obvious one that was amazing a couple of years ago. But it seems nowadays the title sequence goes to the end and they chuck that on to then get your credit scene. Sorry.
Yeah.
Marvel.
I was going to mention that as a very sort of off topic thing, the whole Marvel TV show thing. Those credits should be at the that should open your show. You should have or how I like things: a cold open, your title sequence, then your story.
I mean, I will say it now. I know at the time of recording it, it's not out, but Ahsoka. This isn't a spoiler. Ahsoka's got an incredible title sequence, but it's at the credits of each episode. Yeah. And I understand they don't want them at the opening because it's long, but it's Game of Thrones-esque with a beautiful Kevin Kiner score. That's all I'm going to say for now until you both get to watch it.
I will have to take your word on it because I have no interest in watching it at all.
That's fine. But yeah, it's just that point, though, isn't it? That it's just a missing out, but it's proper grimy, the Fincher ones, that you can tell there's been real care, consideration, craft, and I really like the sequence of Alien, and maybe even watching it, I'd love someone put this in the comment on the announcement video that when they watch that for the first time, that title sequence, and then the rest of the film happens, it's like dives off a cliff. So yeah. That's my favorite scene.
I have
Sorry to steal that.
Favorite scenes. I have two, and I could actually pick a few more scenes because realistically, I do like the scene where Paul McGann goes a bit nuts. I think that's a nice touch to the film, and it's a really interesting kind of plot beat. But I guess first of all is the imagery of the alien running up to Ridley and then kind of screaming in the face. That still sticks with me even after watching this film as what I think of when I think of the Alien franchise. And it's just one shot. But it epitomizes kind of, what the Alien franchise basically is. The alien running up to and screaming at Ridley, and Ridley kind of, fighting the fear in that sense. But it came with the interesting plot beat of, okay, it hasn't attacked Ridley. That's interesting. Why hasn't it done that? And it also came at a very interesting point in the film. They just went and killed off one of the only interesting characters. So, it's a moment that sticks with me. But then I guess the other moment that I want to add in is the kind of the imagery between and switching between the death and rebirth. So the funeral kind of fire and her staring into the flames, and then seeing, the xenomorph kind of burst out of the ox at the same time. That also sticks with me from the film. Sorry, for me it was an ox. So, it worked really well. I really like the editing for the scene. I really like kind of, it set up this film nicely, only for the film not to follow in that same kind of suit and direction. And yeah, I like those two scenes.
If I was going to go theatrical cut, I would say dog bursting, because it's essentially played the same way.
Is it the same? Okay, that's fine.
So
I always wonder though, how did an alien fit in a dog? And now I know it's because of the assembly cut.
So
very quickly. Do you prefer the dog or the ox?
It makes more sense in the cow than it does in the. Right. So I was just going to jump back because the makeup and the sort of costume design of it, whilst obviously really good, but in some shots where it's like 2 inches tall, and then another shot it will be like 8 foot big, 8 foot tall, and grabbing people from the ceiling. That's because originally they had that it bursting out the cow in mind, but they had to change it because of animal issues. And so so the juxtaposition was, so it's just complete mess. I was just gonna point that out. But if I was going assembly, I would. That's a difficult one because there's not a lot to choose from. Just if I'm honestly thinking about it, Charles Dance's death scene was quite nice, quite good. Added some nuance to his character. The funeral scene I've mentioned, the title sequence you've mentioned, George, and Tayte, you mentioned the funeral sequence as well. The ending with Lance Henriksen, I think, is good. Oh, Bishop, when she takes Bishop and plonks him down on the hospital gurney, and wires him up. I thought that was really good. And that was quite a heartbreaking moment. Oh, shut me off. I'm hurting too much. So she's losing more people that she knows. I thought that, in fact, forget what I said. I'm picking out the scenes that I really enjoyed. Whereas originally I said there's not really many to choose from. I've just listed about
that's good though,
5 or 6.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine, and that's kind of what we want this, because it's more people being positive, and we know this film has its fans, even if I'm not one of them per se. That's why we want to get a balance of bringing on people that do enjoy this film and other films, and kind of segueing from that, going to final thoughts for this film. For me, I may have crapped on it a fair amount tonight. There's still some stuff I like in there. I just think it's the theatrical cut that I've seen. It's a struggle to give it that knowledge as a film, knowing that it's the identity of it being directed by someone's been quite robbed. And I normally am quite funny about those of studios, for example, like not to bring up Zack Snyder again, but I don't mind the content of him having his cut, because at the end of the day, if a filmmaker's hired to make their film, let them make their film. It's just as simple as that. Or just fire them at the beginning and hire someone and let them then go and make a film. So it's just, my issues all stem with the production side of things, the issues that rob what could have been one of the greatest third entries in the trilogy contextually at the time. But unfortunately, this is the film that to me then breaks off into having Alien 1 and 2 than Alien 3 and 4. But yeah, not so positive from me. But at the end of the day, going back to the Fincher perspective, it is his first film. It's the film that made him not want to make films. And that's kind of, I think, what we've explained it very well at length, which means the only way is up. Seriously, it's up. He didn't direct Up. He directed Seven. But if he had, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of films that, we can look forward to just off this one film. And yeah, it was interesting watching a film that I'd never seen before by this director. And actually, I quite enjoyed it in the end, which is really interesting in itself. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to conclude upon. So,
no, it's I think the best thing you can say about it is that it's fine / good-ish. The thing that lets it down is the fact that it is in a franchise that is so big, especially for the first two films, that it's nowhere, not even gonna. I mean, even if they'd made the film how Fincher wanted, and the changes that he wanted to make during production, the script he altered, I don't think it would have been as good. Or it still wouldn't have surpassed Alien or Aliens. That's my reasoning. I still enjoy it. I will probably go back to it every couple of years when I'm on an Alien marathon. Other than that,
well, if there's a film coming out, when is it, next year? I did look up who directed it. I didn't recognize the director from anything I'd seen. But if there is another film coming out, I guess that's time to go back through the franchise and maybe my first foray into Alien 4 and see how that is.
What's Alien 4? What? That's all I'm saying. Not for I wouldn't, but it's for you to watch, Tate. To tick it off.
I mean, here's the thing. I'm still currently going through the Scream franchise and haven't really managed to get round to watching Scream 4 yet, which is apparently one of the worst ones. So,
which one? A single Scream film, but
Scream 4.
No, Scream 4 was good.
Was it good? Okay. I heard different
Scream 3 was good.
People.
Scream 2 was good. Obviously, Scream 1 is the
what
best
about
one.
Scream 5? What happens when I get to Scream 5?
I've to be honest, I've not watched past 4. If I'm being completely honest.
So. Got to get to 6, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I've seen none, but we have actually been asked about that multiple times. I'm not going to lie. Should have said that behind the scenes. But rounding out this, I mean, listen, we spoke about Alien 3 a lot. I'm just going to bring up the schedule for what is coming soon. So next week we've got 7, which I cannot wait for. And if you look at the screen, you can see people watching at home. We've also got The Game on the 11th, Fight Club on the 18th, Panic Room the 25th. So there are some absolute bangers coming up in the entire schedule. There's not a poster for The Killer yet, so that's just blank. But there's a pretty elite catalogue of films, right?
Yeah.
Aside from Alien 3 there, that is pretty incredible. So it's going to be exciting to go through a few of these films I've seen loads, a few of these films I've seen once. So we're going to be really excited to see a fair few for the second time and a couple of them to see for the first time. So do join us every Monday. We're going to be doing these, and like we have done across the day, please do comment your thoughts on Alien 3. If you're fuming at us, if you're not fuming at us, if you've got a favorite cut, just let us know your thoughts on all of that. And if you want Tate to watch Alien 4, also comment that and subscribe to us. If you've liked this video, this series, as I said, it's going to be every Monday. There's so much happening at the moment. We've got Ahsoka live streams every Wednesday, which we mentioned earlier. We've got new releases. We're heading into award season, so we'll have London Film Festival coverage coming up on the channel. it's going to get busy. It's heading to that end of year run, and hopefully we actually get some big new releases that aren't postponed. As obviously we hope that the strikes come to an end and studios finally have a bit of common sense. We just spoke for an hour and a half about how terrible one of the studios is.
Yeah,
don't exist anymore. They got bought by a bigger one. But yeah, that's gonna round this out. Tom, as always, thank you for coming on for this episode.
I was going to say, P.S. AI sucks.
Yeah, it does. And we've got the creator coming out in September, which I cannot wait for, which is also about AI. Big up Gareth Edwards. But everyone, please follow Tom on Twitter at TomIsMusing. You're always on our retrospectives. We've had you on this channel for years and years. I feel like your first appearance might have even been before Tate's, if I'm being completely
possibly.
honest.
Could have possibly. Been. Yeah.
If it wasn't, it was soon after. But it's always a pleasure to get you back on. So thank you for taking time out to join us on this. We'll definitely have you on for another one. But just for some behind the scenes, the moment the idea came to switch it to Fincher, I messaged Tom straight away, like, can you come on Alien 3? And that was the start of the conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then there's been more to be had. So thank you for joining us. As always, you can get us on social media, linktree.com/cinemasavvy. All of our social media sites are on there, which we update. Aside from that, thank you all for watching. Take care. We hope you don't hate us for hating this film. We had a perfect balance, we think. So see you all on the next one. Take care.